Welcome to the podcast, Joey Goone. Tell us about the work that you do with Utopia Experience, because we're going to dig into events today. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, like what's working right now. But first, set the stage for us in the work that you do.
Yes. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm super pumped to be here. Yes. So Utopia Experience, we are an event and video production company that really specialize in helping people produce really meaningful experiences. And so the best way, I guess, if I were doing the elevator pitch, if you will, the shortened version or condensed version is like all technology that we bring to events is informed by something that is much deeper. And so it's not merely technology. Technology is a conduit for us, but everything that we do and everything that we try and help our agencies and organizations understand that we work with, whether that's a for-profit conference or a nonprofit gala fundraiser, is psychological safety and neuroscience, and how important that is when we bring people together in any community of any kind, anywhere, at any time. And so I'll stop there. I mean, we can dive into all the things.
You dropped neuroscience in the intro. I'm very happy. I'm reading. Neuroscientist wrote it. Lessons from the Magic Shop. Do you know him?
No, the Magic Shop.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Dr. James R. Doty. It's a good one, but it just reminded me. So he talks a lot about, brain wiring and all of the things, thinking thoughts on purpose, and weaves in some manifestation in there as well. Amazing. Well, we're going to dig in. You said you have a juicy story for us. So I've got a bunch of questions for you, but first, tell us about your morning.
Yeah. So before we hit record, we started talking about the inner work and how important it is to, really hone in on that inner voice. And for me, one of the most important things that I think I've done for myself and my growth is to get uncomfortable and to find ways to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. And if I can do that on the mat when I'm doing yoga, or if I can do it out in nature, or if I can do it in the gym, then I can apply it to any life circumstance that I'm going through. And so this morning I started a 6-mile hike, and I went, I was sipping my coffee, getting ready for an invigorating workout in nature. And little did I know that my morning would turn into an epic battle for survival. So I start my hike, and I was immediately swarmed by mosquitoes and cicadas. And it was too early in the morning for me to remember bug spray. So I spent the first really, 45 minutes of my hike slapping at my arms and legs like an orchestra conductor. And then at the 2-mile mark, and I'm sure, we don't often talk about this, but because this is an open forum and dialogue, I know there will be people out there nodding in affirmation, like, yes, this completely resonates. The dreaded coffee hit. And
that's an annoying laugh. That's a knowing laugh. You're safe here.
My stomach gurgling like a witch's cauldron.
Oh no.
So my leisurely hike, I'm 2 miles in, I'm too far to turn around, and I'm far enough in it to just commit. I've got mosquitoes swarming me. I've got, I'm hanging out with the cicadas, and of course the dreaded, how do I say this diplomatically on a podcast without saying
you said it.
Guts? I can say bubble guts. Oh my God. So I have 3.5 miles to go. And with every step, the urgency grew. So I'm trying to keep a steady pace, and I'm running. And it was just this blur of adrenaline and sheer determination, which is fundraising and growing a business in and of itself. So finally, I burst out of the trail, found the nearest Starbucks, which was 1.5 miles away. Thanked them for letting me use the restroom and grabbed another black coffee. Why not? And so, yes, all of this, throughout that entire process, it's the inner journey of that voice inside my head is, I can do this. I'm going to persevere. And no matter what, there's will, grit, and determination to make it through on the other side. Although one of the monikers that I love to live by is the journey is the destination.
Yep.
So enjoy the journey. And this was a tough one to enjoy, Christina.
Joey, you've basically hit a lot of our core values on the podcast and in my coaching program. We talk about grit. We talk about determination. We talk about that self-talk, because the self-talk can actually get you to where you want to be or make that process of finding that Starbucks grueling, right? It was grueling either way, but there's one where you actually kind of talk yourself through it, right? And one not so much. And our fundraisers do this for sure, where there's one version where you're calling that donor and it feels horrible before, during, and after because of that self-talk. And there's one where you're like, you know what, I got this. You know what, I'm giving this a try. You know what, I know I can do this. There'll be data on the other side, whatever it is you choose to talk yourself through it. That's the secret. Like that is the secret to hitting those revenue goals. So we're already, I'm thrilled. You've already peeled back the curtain of vulnerability and we're going to dig in today.
Stripped all my clothes off. I am the most metaphorically here. That's the most vulnerable I've ever been in recording a podcast, telling a very, gross, but I'm sure relatable story for many of us.
So we're going to dig in to let's take it to setting the stage, something we talked about a little bit in the green room, which is, you fly all over to put on these events, right? For different organizations. And maybe the fly on the wall, what you've heard before is this scarcity mindset of like, oh, we're in the black on this event. And then the finger pointing that comes next, which is, well, it's the fundraising tool. Well, the board didn't get in, we didn't have enough board engagement. So let's kind of have a conversation about that mindset, especially when it comes to events, because many events, as you know, tend to be in the black or the red. So if it's in the black, is that bad? And kind of reframe looking at fundraising events for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I very much appreciate this. And I would love to make this more of like a, you jump in when you get inspired by a thought, because you have so much to share around this as well. But, for me, it's about like, I think so many executive directors or directors of development look at an event as this end all be all, this magical thing that is going to solve all of our problems. And in reality, an event creates opportunities. And what we share with a lot of our clients is that, events are the beginning of a relationship. The end of the event is the beginning of a relationship. And so I always chuckle at the director of development who on, Saturday or, if it's a Thursday or weekend of whatever their event is over, they come over, we do the huddle and everyone's hugging and crying and laughing. And it was, oh my God, can you believe what we did? And then like, hey, director of development, what are you doing tomorrow? Oh, I'm taking a week off. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. You deserve that time and you absolutely should take the time to fill your cup. However, do you think you might be able to do it the week after next week? Because on Monday is when, if you do what you should be doing at the event and create this exceptionally emotional, supercharged experience where people leave and they're like, wow, I'm feeling altruistic. I'm feeling connected. I'm feeling like a sense of community and purpose and belonging. You got to hit on that and strike while the iron's hot. And so you just lose steam and momentum if you wait too long to follow up with those people. And so many organizations don't follow up with those people. They instead do the obligatory printed form letter, rubber stamped by the executive director. And that's what everyone else does. And so I always think about what can we do that is significantly different from other people. And so that has absolutely nothing to do with the thing that Utopia actually brings to the event. It's just more of like our philosophy or mindset. Like if you are not seeing the need to evolve your event as a blessing, then we're probably not a good fit to partner with each other.
So you just gave some really good tips. So I see it like two-pronged. One is, yes, you are allowed to rest after the event, but just rest the week after the week you normally rest, right? Because that's the honeymoon period. And it's like, I see in my mind's eye, I see this like graph of like, I've left the event. It was so awesome. I'm like, oh my God, what they're doing is so cool. And it was so nice to see Julie and Tim and everybody there. And then it's like falling off a cliff as to how it remains top of mind. I think I had a training about this a long time ago. If you Google the forgetting curve, it'll be on there. And so it's just like, use that week, use the 7 days to actually like take advantage of the honeymoon period. And yes, you get time off too. Like we want to make sure that our nonprofit, staff gets to, because I think that's the other piece. And maybe if they don't have a team like yours, that's the other reason why they're closing the lights, they're getting in the car after the event and they're going, thank God it's over. So now I get to like face plant. And so maybe that's the other piece, is not having a team around you to help you actually plan a great event is probably why you're face planting for a week after. Maybe what would you say to that?
Completely concur and agree with all of that. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just had this conversation with one of my dear friends who's an executive director for a nonprofit in Kansas City. And she called me because her director of development decided to leave and go on to a different organization. So she put her 2 weeks in. And I got the call from my friend and she's like, you know, what do I do? I've got all these things. And, you know, and I totally understand now you as the executive director are bearing the burden of all of those additional responsibilities. And I just shared with her, you know, now think of it as an opportunity, right? Like that person was being called somewhere else and who's being called into your organization. Now let's go find them, because just think of, you know, like as a business owner, the greatest gift that you can give to yourself is to find other people that are as passionate and purpose-driven as you and bring them in.
Yep.
Bring them into that organization and allow that, because gosh, it is so challenging to scale any business. Like there's this incredible book, and I'm not going to remember the name of the book, but I just remember he breaks it out in like 3 or 4 different phases of business. And that first phase is the most difficult. And once you make it to that $1 million, it's so much easier to go from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, because now
I totally agree. Yeah.
The systems and processes and the people.
It's like you're paving the path to the first million. You're like literally paving the path, versus after that you have some SOPs, you have some more staff, things like that. So yeah, I totally agree. So I planned one event one time. This is a million years ago. And I said, take it off the website. We're never doing it again. This is in my marketing and PR days when I owned an agency. So I have a special affinity for event planners and the work you do. This work takes organization. This work takes a dedicated staff, to your own point, of like people who are passionate about it. And so now my role in event planning is simply as event attendee. I love to attend a fundraiser, any sort of nonprofit event. So because of that, I'm in the room of quite a few events, and I sort of see these like common mistakes that over and over and over again. And I want to dig into this and maybe some like low lifts or what you see working better. So one of the more common mistakes is that the purpose of the event is a little broad and the who it's for is a little broad. So we invite everyone, which is okay, right? But then I find that, is this a fundraising event? Are we asking? I was at an event not that long ago, this is maybe a few months ago, where the ask just was really soft, but I knew personally that this was a fundraising event. And so I think there is also that like nervousness from the ED or whoever's speaking, or what are we doing? And oh, well, there's a silent auction. People will just donate it over there if they want to. So what do you say to all that? Like, how do we actually make a fundraising event, and who should come, and what are some of the key elements we'd like to see?
That's such a powerful question and thing to dive into. Yeah, I think the biggest, from my own personal experience, where I've seen the greatest growth is when the ED steps out of the way.
Ooh, say more.
Because you are this is Tony Robbins' philosophy, if there's any Tony Robbins fans out there. You're so invested in the outcome, and you're so emotionally attached to the outcome of what happens that night, that it can almost, in a way, like when you start to feel, oh my God, I kind of feel gross because I'm like, am I begging? Am I pleading? Like, am I coming? How am I coming? When you feel that, the audience feels that.
Yeah.
And so that's the time to ask for professionals. Hire the professional fundraising auctioneer to come in and to make the ask on your behalf. Ask a family. You know, I mean, we can ask families for you. And the way we frame it is, hey, would you mind sharing your story of what your family persevered through, or what your family had to go through and what you learned? Because your story could help, could uplift, could educate, empower another family that's there tonight. And when you frame it that way, you bring in professionals and allow you to start framing those conversations and then making those asks and telling those stories for you on your behalf. Oh, it's such a more powerful lens for you as the executive director to sit and experience it and watch it all unfold. and to actually connect with people in the room instead of worrying about what you're going to say all night.
Okay, those are great suggestions. So the first is just honoring that, like, if you feel like as the ED, you're trying to extract from the crowd, it might be true. You are in that energy of just being like, I have to fundraise. So maybe you're not the person, right? Maybe you're not the person. You actually reminded me of several years ago. I was at an amazing fundraiser and they had the best host who they hired, who was like part auctioneer, part just hype person. And it was the most fun because I grew up in the auction world, so I love a good paddle raise, but I love the energy of a crowd. And I remember this guy did this like pre-game. It was like, well, before we have the actual auction, let's just raise some paddles, and they raised $10,000 just in the energy of the room. And it was like, God, what a great investment. Versus the ED feeling that sort of have to energy, feeling the tightness, feeling very like transactional. So yeah, maybe you're not the best person for it, and that's okay.
It's perfectly okay.
Yeah.
And so many EDs feel like if they admit that they're admitting a flaw, or that like they're supposed to be this stage presence and this person because wait, I'm in that position. But like the greatest gift that I ever realized as the president of our company and the one who's leading the ship is I don't matter. Like I put my ego aside and I try and step to the side as much as I possibly can. And I'm like, how can I empower the team to step in and make decisions without me having to feel like I have to bear the burden of all that responsibility just because of the position that I'm in? So what a gift you can give to yourself to be able to delegate that responsibility and empower your, other people in your network and other partners that want to help you.
And like trust in your team, trust in the people around you, right? And trust that like it doesn't need to all fall on you. And in fact, it would be better if it didn't, and kind of letting people to share their stories. So let's dig into storytelling. What do you feel like are the elements that we should look for and craft in the event itself? What kind of stories should be shared? Are these videos? Tell me all the things.
Yeah, so it's a combination of all the things. So everything that we do, we try and utilize story. And I can just give you a bunch of different examples in hopes that maybe one of those examples resonates with someone from the audience. And so our goal when we go to an event is, okay, so before we zoom in, can I zoom out one quick second and sort of set the like preface all of the tech?
Yes.
So there's 3 reasons why people come to events from what we found. And we call them the 3 C's. And in full transparency, I didn't create these. We were a part of another organization called the Exchange Approach. Christina, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but John Berghoff's the CEO over there, and it's an incredible organization. They teach facilitators how to facilitate more powerful conversations, and it's all through looking at the lens, like the power of a question. And so you've got all these facilitators that are going out and doing events all over the world for some of the coolest organizations, and then bringing everything back and just sharing, here's what we found. What we found was 3 reasons people go to events. Number 1, people go for content. They want to learn something new. They want to have an aha moment. They want to be inspired. The second reason people go to events is for connection. They want to connect with other people that are like-minded. And that's pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. And most people stop there. They're planning an event around content. They're planning an event around connection. We found that people come for those 2 things, but they come back for this 3rd C, and that's community. And that is the opportunity that is often missed in your traditional fundraising events. And what do I mean by that? Well, if we bring people into a space, 500 strangers, and put them in a seat and deliver a passive program at them for 4 hours, there's no opportunity for them. Yes, there's opportunity for them to connect with the mission. But the most important thing that you can do at your events is to create the space for them to connect with each other.
Okay. So I think community, especially in our sector, is a word that's thrown around like the word empower and transform, and it's just thrown around and it's lost like its true meaning. So many organizations are like, join our community in our monthly giving circle. But community is actually it's stickier and so much deeper, and you're starting to allude on it. And that is the piece that brings people back. That is the piece that you get that retention from, and not that like one and done. So I think you're right on that. And I love that. And you reminded me of another pet peeve, is to go to an event and be like, well, I see that I was in my little pod of the people I was with and kind of knew, and everybody else was in their pod. And unless there was like one boisterous, super outgoing person in the room, none of the different groups really intersected, right? I hate that. So how do we create community in an event where there are introverts, there are lots of people, there are like lots of sights and sounds and things like that? How do we do it?
It's really like, once you have an understanding of the neuroscience, then you bring on a company like us, or, you know, and a consultant like yourself, and a fundraising professional, an auctioneer, and all of us together create this really cohesive, empowering experience. And so one of the things that I think about is like what we nerded out on before we hit record in the first few minutes of our conversation is neuroscience, is that most people are going through life in fight or flight back here in the amygdala or the monkey brain. And so the greatest thing that we could do at any event is to get them out of the monkey brain, the lizard brain, that's the fight or flight, and I'm like closed off and like disconnected because I'm overhyped on caffeine and emails and all the things that I've been doing at home, all these things vying for my attention, and I'm overstimulated, and get them in a space in the limbic system that allows them to feel the emotions, which will ultimately and eventually open the prefrontal cortex if we continue to lean into that, and the neocortex that surrounds the brain. And so we create these little activations to allow that to happen. One of which, because I'm sure everyone's like, okay, yeah, great, enough with the philosophy, give me something. And that's great. I'm going to give you all the things. One of the things we recently did is we worked with a hospital foundation down in Florida, and we created this immersive experience with all these different rooms, and we took donors. So they registered, they had color coordinated paddles, and we called them by color in groups of 20 to 30 people and took them on this immersive guided tour of these different rooms that were outfitted to tell different stories along the patient journey life cycle.
I love that.
The first room was, your child is diagnosed with this thing. You're scared. What do you do? The second room was, and each room sort of plays into that particular theme. The second room was, now you realize that there's this foundation that can help you. And they're going to help you financially. And then the third room was hope. Wow, they're actually going to, like, they saved our child. And then the fourth room was gratitude. Now we want to give back to the foundation. And all the families at the end of the tour were there greeting all the donors.
Oh my gosh. I love it when we close the story loop. That's so good. Yeah. And I also love about, that being experiential. So like, this person isn't going to sort of like a museum where you stare at a painting on a wall. They're actually, if you've ever been to a museum where you are a part of the exhibit, maybe you put on little special shoe covers and you walk into the exhibit. You're going to remember those moments so much more because you lived in them, through them. That's so smart. And yeah, I can think of organizations going, amazing, Christina, but I don't know how to do that. And it's like, well, think about this too. This is about reimagining whatever your fall gala is, whatever your spring fling is, and what does your audience want? Because they are probably tired of the same old anyway, and reimagining what you're doing year after year after year into something that they want, into something that would generate more connection, more community with them, and trying that. Like, I'm all about just trying new things. And I think that's another way that we can start to respond to, some of the headlines, the giving is down and things like that. I think this idea of trying something new, the more immersive experience, would net in a higher, not only higher fundraising revenue that night, but a higher longevity of that donor. Yeah. You're nodding. Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Okay. So what else do you feel like are some community builders or even another case study you would like to share with us? Because I think that that's really helpful to hear, like, what it looks like in practice. Tell us another.
Yeah. So, I still think about like this event because there were so many things just beyond that were done that brought so much intention into the experience. Like, for instance, the kids, when they go through their last surgery, the doctors bring them out and they hit a bell to signify that this is it for them, right? Like, they made it. We brought the bell, the actual bell the kids ring to the gala. And all of the donors, as they entered into the main program room, got to ding the bell. There was one of the kids on the 4th story. So these were all different, like each room had a different video that we had pre-recorded with the families. The kiddo on the 4th story, Campbell, all he wanted to do was give back to the organization, and he loved 3D printing. So he started this 3D printing company, and the organization is one in which helps kids with like life-altering, limb-saving treatments. So a starfish is the only animal that can regrow its limbs. And I think a crab can do the same. But anyway, he was printing starfish on site with little sayings on them and giving them to donors as they came through this experience. And they were on a tree, and he was telling the story of what the significance of the starfish. So little immersive activations like that. And then another thing that we did at a different event was, this was an event I was an attendee at. The Fund to Need video played. Before they asked for money, they asked us to write a letter to the family. And there was this little girl battling a terminal illness. It was waterworks in the room. There were 100, 150 of us that were just beside ourselves bawling because I didn't have a child at the time. I do now. And I could not imagine what this family had to endure going through that with their little girl. So we wrote these beautiful letters to her, you know, offering her words of inspiration and hope and connection and love and support. Sent them off. They closed the loop 2 months later and sent us back the little girl reading our letters, a video of the girl reading our letters and thanking us for those beautiful letters that we had written to her and her family. So how can we create little moments like that in our event? Because this happened to me 8 years ago. I was a donor, and I still remember the emotional, that visceral, raw, like I get goosebumps just bringing it back up every time I bring it up. How do we create more feelings like that in your community?
Here's why I like that example is for the stressed out fundraiser, for the comms fundraiser ED person that's wearing all the hats. This is something that they can call back to. You said it was 2 months later. So it's like in a movie when they call back something, it's like referencing back something. But again, it's a touch point for that donor to say, we see you, you're part of this. And so it's a good reminder that if you don't do it within the first 7 days, that's okay. You can build in a comm strategy or this sort of callback strategy that is 3 months later. Yeah. Or something like that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
A connection point.
It gives you, exactly. It gives you another reason to reach out.
Yeah. Okay. So kind of a big question, which is, should everyone do an in-person event? What type of organization should do an event? I feel like I've been on the receiving end of just everything, a smorgasbord of whether they're funding size, org size. We do an event. We've never done an event. We only do an event for our donors. We only do an event for the people in our programs. This sort of, I've seen it all. What's the best? What works best for you? And what's a good kind of litmus test of, all right, you guys are ready for an event?
Yeah, I just finished. Are you familiar with Alex Hormozy?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just finished his book. And it's $100 million leads.
Yep.
You've read it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you know how he breaks down the 4 quadrants? So you've got in 4 different quadrants. In the top left quadrant, you've got 1-to-1 connection, people who know you. Then you've got 1-to-1 people who don't know you. 1-to-many people who know you. 1-to-many people who don't know you. And so you have to look at those 4 quadrants and figure out like which one is going to help us in terms of like overall, like where do our people live? Where do they exist? How do we appeal to them? And I would say, like, I would personally start with 1-to-1 people who know you, because
100%.
this strategy focuses on it's affordable. You're leveraging personal networks through warm outreach, and you're using organic reach like social media, text and calls and friends and family to promote your business.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I would start. Once you outgrow that, then you're in like the 1-to-1 people who don't know you, or the 1-to-many people who know you.
Yes.
Those categories are like cold outreach. So like 1-to-1 people who don't know you is cold outreach to individuals that are unfamiliar with your business. So that's leads lists, LinkedIn outreach. I mean, so many different things you can do in that space. There's Zoom Info and Lead IQ and Apollo. You're building community through different funnels. You're trying to build a network online. And then from there, then and only then do you get into, okay, we've exhausted our resources in terms of the one-to-one people who don't know and one-to-one people who know. Now we need to go one-to-many. And one-to-many people who know you and one-to-many people who don't know you, those two categories, I would say, like, when you get there, which is like, how do we grow more and leverage efficiency and optimize it? And we have a little bit of money to be able to invest in that thing, because it's going to, a great event is 100,000 plus. Then I would start to look at an event and building your ecosystem that way.
Okay. I love that overview. A great event is 100,000 plus to put on. Is that what you're saying?
To put on.
So how much should a 100K-ish event bring in?
That's a low.
At minimum. How about that?
Yeah.
Not, yeah.
You know, I don't know.
Here's a harder question, maybe, or maybe a different way to say it.
Yeah.
Is it okay for an event to break even? I don't want an event in the red. I'll tell you that. I don't want an event in the red. Should an organization put on a break-even event, or are we always looking to at least make some?
I think that if you're within the first 5 years of doing an event, you should expect to be in the red or break even.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
If you're beyond that, if you've been producing your event for more than 5 years and you've got some SOPs built around it and you've got a strategy and a plan and a network, and for whatever reason you're not growing year over year, I think that's the time you really need to look at evolution of your event and bringing in a creative consultant like our team or another one to try and retool and re-engineer how you're putting on an event. All
right. I'm going to underscore what you just said, which is, if this is a brand new event, Christina's event is happening this fall, go ahead and expect this is going to be 0 to 5 years. There may be some in the red or in the black. Yeah. If this is an event that you've been rocking and rolling for years and years and years, 5+ years, 10 years, 15 years, and you're noticing it's also close to in the black or even in the red, to me, that's when I usually say kindly, do we need to sunset this event? But I like what you said first, which is an evolution, I think is how you said it, right? Of like, what is the new, how do we reimagine this event? Because there is some school of thought of like, your audience is probably trained to go to this event. So if we sunset it completely, that could have a cost. But how do we put on a more profitable event? Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And don't think an event is the only way, right? Like, you start with this puddle-sized audience, then you build to a pond, then a lake, then an ocean. And I still think an event is the absolute best way of reaching like a deep, meaningful connection and community with people, that one-to-many platform. Because you can have an ocean-sized audience with a very real, intimate connection that can only be had in that space. But you absolutely have to nail it. And you've got to be authentic. Otherwise, you stand to alienate and break trust with your audience.
Say more about that. You're saying you have to be authentic, otherwise you may alienate. Like when an event goes bad, is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think it's that, and it's also people shying away from talking about what the real problem is and where the money goes. Like you have to be, again, this comes back to Christina, what we talked about right before we hit record in the green room and also right when we started. You've got to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. Yeah. You have to be willing to have those difficult conversations of like, yeah, this sucks. Of like, this is what real people are going through every single day. But like, you got to talk about it and help people understand where that money goes. And if it's just glossed over, or, you know, people ask questions and you're like, yeah, that's not really a thing that we talk about because we're afraid of, what's exploiting these people, right? Like you sometimes you've got to find a mindful and meaningful way to have those conversations so that people genuinely understand where their dollars go. Because I think, and Christina, this is more your territory than mine, but I hear a lot from friends and family that go to galas. They're like, I have no idea where my money goes. And so that's how you break trust with an audience, is to give people that type of response after they've left and donated.
Yeah, I think there's a lot in there. 100%. They need to know where their money is going. and not in a vague, just speaking in cliches. The other piece that you said was, I think in regards to telling the stories of the programs or services. And that really starts, especially because we've mentioned children. Sometimes we're, dealing with sensitive situations, and there is a consent-based way to tell those stories to your audience in a gala. So just figuring that out. I always want to make sure that whatever child story or even adult story you're telling, that they know you're telling it. And it's starting with that consent piece, sort of levels the playing field too, for you to be able to tell those stories in a way that feels really good for you and for them. So there are lots of ways you can do this, whether you need to tell it anonymously or not. But I think bridging the gap and leaning into the hard, and maybe there is to a little bit of a mindset of like, oh, but what we do is really, heavy. I don't want to tell that story at a gala. And it's like, no, that's why we're here. We're not just here to drink champagne, right? We're not here to just take pictures of ourselves, of telling the stories of, and that ends up being like that arc that I'm talking about of the before and after, the transformation. Those are the stories we actually want to hear. Yeah.
There's an organization in Kansas City that we've worked with before that deals with females under 18 that have been sexually trafficked. And it's sad. And it's terrible, and it's happening in our world. And so we need to talk about how do we get these females out of this really precarious, awful situation. And so some females wanted to get on and actually share their story to empower others. Others wanted to remain anonymous, and we blurred their faces.
Yep.
In other cases, we brought on paid actors that were relatively affordable because they were local. And so there's ways to tell the story. And I'm not, by the way, like, I just wanted to, the reason I share this is because I want to say, like, I am sensitive and empathetic to these types of stories. Our entire team is. And we can frame it as you are giving someone a gift by sharing your story and so they understand. Because like there's so many of us who, I don't even realize, if I wasn't in the nonprofit space and helping put on these events, I wouldn't know that this was as much of a problem. It was as pervasive as it actually is.
Yep.
And so by telling the story, you're like, this is a problem. We need to address it.
Yeah. So the importance of storytelling has really been a theme here, is that your event shouldn't just be a party and food and a band. It should tell stories. And if it has that experiential quality, I think that's the next level of this for sure. Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners that is like, do this, not that, or maybe even as people are really hungry for gathering that we've seen of just like the Zoom fatigue is real? Any other trends that you feel like this is working a little bit better for our clients, or these are where this is the direction even I see organizations move to that's going to be really successful?
Yeah, I think I heard someone say this the other day and I was like, yes, this is it. I think there's a lot of fear and maybe not fear, maybe just uncertainty and unknown around the power of AI.
Mm-hmm.
And I was watching a keynote, and his keynote was, in the power of AI, the power of relationships and human connection becomes that much more important. So the marketplace of the future is genuine human connection, because AI is desensitizing us in so many ways. So how can we then step into the power of human to human connection? And if you're doing an event, damn, what a great place to be.
I think that's so smart. One of our top podcasts on here is with Hinge. So Hinge, the dating app. So they have an entire social impact arm. And that arm basically ran a pilot program this year for people to meet in real life, to create specifically friendships in real life, prioritizing basically in-person meeting, because they're seeing with the loneliness epidemic, they're seeing with Gen Z this piece. And that really underscores what you just said, which is people are hungry for this piece. And I saw a meme last night that was like, I just want AI to do my dishes. I just want AI to clean my house. And it's like, yeah, let's use AI. Let's figure that out to do like this little tasks.
Transactional, like,
yes. But so like, I'm not worried about it when I think of it in that way. Like, let's just make the back end ops part of my life easier. Beautiful. But that can't replace this, right? That can't replace that in-person piece.
The event industry has an economic impact of $1.6 trillion. And I'm looking at a study in front of me right now. This is from Cvent, which is the largest data mining event company, SaaS company on the planet. And this is what they gather. This was their study that they just put out there and published in regard to 23 to 24 event trends. 75% of event professionals are optimistic about events in 2024. 41% say registrations are up. 46% of event professionals will plan more events next year. So
okay, I have to ask you one more question. Yes. I'm going to ask you this, and then we're going to go to the super duper last question.
Shoot.
Why are events so hard to sell tickets for, if all of that is true? Or are they?
Yeah, do you know Tucker Wanamaker, Thrive Impact? He's his mission is to solve the nonprofit leader burnout problem. He had a newsletter that went out a couple months ago, and his answer to this question was like, I'm going to take that and repurpose it and steal it because it's brilliant. But I'm giving him credit. And his thing is, are we asking people to give, or are we inviting them into their joy? And so I think it's getting very clear on who are we marketing to and how are we inviting them to come into this community, into this ecosystem? Is it just, hey, come to this thing, it's an event, yeah, buy a ticket?
Yep.
Or is it, is there a strategy, like a 6-month strategy around why someone might want to attend? Do you pull a video in of someone like Christina because Christina's passionate about puppies and it's a puppy fundraiser and Christina has her puppy and she's like, I got my dog from this organization and I love them and this is why I'm going, you should go, right? Do you have those videos? Or like, is there a longer strategy to invite people into joy, to make them feel, or are we just doing the obligatory, like, we're going to throw up an Eventbrite, we're going to do it on, our mobile bidding platform, and we're going to send out a couple emails and whoever comes.
Yeah. All right. Great distinction. It's also in line with Priya Parker's work from The Art of Gathering. And she talks about the event really beginning at the time of the invitation and really at the time the person buys the ticket. I remember I mentioned this to you. Did you read it? This was back in our summit. It was like, you have to read it. Have you read it?
Okay. So full disclosure.
I
haven't, but I wanted to.
He's holding the book up. If anyone is not watching the video, he's holding Priya's book up. Yes.
I ordered it after the summit.
Yeah.
And I promise you it is on my list.
You're going to love it because it's basically in your brain. It's already in your brain as doing all of the work that you're doing. It's just, you're going to be like, oh my God, it's going to just come in. Yeah.
You know, the reticular activating system thing where you see the yellow Honda and then the yellow Honda everywhere?
Yes.
Now that I have the book on my shelf, I've had like 6 or 7 people, kid you not, mention that book like in the last 2 months of conversations. It's come up so many times.
Yeah, it's so good. All right. We ask every guest on the podcast to share what is one thought you like to think on purpose. This can be an affirmation, a mantra, a motto, whatever is kind of your good go-to. Would you share yours with our audience?
I have 2 that come to mind.
Yeah.
One is that the journey is the destination. And I listened to Jim Carrey accepting an Oscar award, and he talks about this lonely mountaintop that he stood on the precipice of, thinking that, wow, I'm here. There is no higher. I can't go any higher in my career because I told myself when I get there, I've made it. And here I am and I'm lonely. And so I think that is an example of how many of us think about life, It's just, can we, and this is from my own personal experience, can I enjoy the journey of what I'm doing today just a little bit more, knowing that it's not about the outcome, it's about how I'm showing up in this moment right now. And then my second one is that your success is someone else's miracle.
Oh, so good. Yes.
That's from my mentor, Jeff Hoffman. And that one has stuck with me since I met him at that event when we did the letter writing. He was there facilitating that experience. That has stuck with me so much. And he's like, you don't have to have $1 million to make an impact. You just have to have a heart and a consciousness. Go next door, ask your neighbor. It's like, you don't even realize how much your neighbors might need your help. Go ask someone, like, what can I do to serve you? How can I just offer a smile? Can I hold the door for the person behind me at Starbucks? What can you do? Your success is someone else's miracle. No matter where you are, you can offer a gift to someone else.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing those with our listeners and sharing so many good event strategies and tips and kind of what we see it moving into in the next decade. Where can everyone find you? Where you hang out on LinkedIn? Tell us all the places.
Yes. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. You can search for Joey Goone on LinkedIn. I don't know that many goons will show up. You'll probably be able to find me. I would just guess. And then, yeah, Utopia Experience is our company. We're on Google, LinkedIn, all the socials.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of your expertise with our listeners. It was great.
Thank you so much, Christine. Appreciate you having me.